who has confirmed that markets are functioning effectively and that our banking system is resilient. I know too that this is an anxious time for families who are worried about the cost of living. We have your backs. And British businesses who are worried about what a changing world will mean for them, we have your backs too. This government is clear-eyed that our response to global change cannot be to watch and wait, but instead to act decisively, to take the right decisions that are in our national interest, protecting working people. All of the decisions that we make as a government will be underpinned by the stability of our non-negotiable fiscal rules. Mr. Speaker, a trade war is in nobody's interest. It is why we must remain pragmatic, cool-headed and pursue the best deal with the United States that is in our national interest. This remains our priority, and that was part of the discussion that I had with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last week. But we have been clear, nothing is off the table. It is why we will continue to back British businesses during these uncertain times, particularly those industries that are most affected, as we rebuild our industrial base here in Britain. We showed that backing yesterday when the Prime Minister and I announced new measures to give British car makers certainty, stability, and to support them on the transition to electric vehicles. We have put forward plans to support our life sciences sector by cutting back the time it will take to set up clinical trials in the UK. It is why we are working with our international allies to reduce barriers to trade right across the world. Over recent days, I have had discussions with my counterparts in Canada, Australia, Ireland, France, Spain and France, and with the European Commission. We will pursue these talks in earnest. Tomorrow, I will hold talks with the Indian government as part of our two nations' economic and financial dialogue as we seek to secure a new trade deal with India. And finally, we must go further and faster in our mission to kickstart economic growth. I know that the challenges facing the global economy and the potential impact could be profound. And as a government, we must step up to that challenge to deliver security for working people through our plan for change that is underpinned by stability, reform and investment. Prioritising the builders, not the blockers. Reforming our public services, not defending the status quo. Investing in our long-term infrastructure, not cutting it for the short term. Security for working people. Renewal for Britain. That is our focus. And, Mr. Speaker, that is what this government will deliver.
Shadow Chancellor Mellström.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and could I thank the Right Honourable Lady for the advance notice of her comments. Mr. Speaker, this is a time of great concern for millions of people up and down our country, for businesses and as an open trading nation for our economy at large. Free trade has been the bedrock of prosperity for our country and many countries around the world for decades. It has raised billions out of poverty. Tariffs are the enemy of free trade, and we on this side of the House will do whatever we can to assist the government in getting those tariffs down. Having said that, of course, we will never cease becoming an effective opposition, vigorously holding them to account, not least on the disastrous decisions that they have taken already in respect of our economy. But we will be responsible when it comes to these matters, particularly where market sensitivities are engaged. Could I ask the Right Honourable Lady the following? Firstly, could she provide further details of the US negotiations and specifically whether further meetings with Scott Bessent and others have been arranged that involve herself? Secondly, what areas beyond tariffs are being discussed in those negotiations? Thirdly, what sectors beyond cars and life sciences that the Right Honourable Lady made reference to are being considered for potential government support? And finally, could she update the House on what options there are for protecting sectors of the economy which may be affected by the dumping of goods as a consequence of trade diversion?
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for that response and also for his offer to work constructively. I think that in my time as Shadow Chancellor, those moments when we can work constructively in the national interest, whether that was in the response to COVID or indeed in supporting Ukraine against the aggression of Russia, it is when this House is at its best, when we work together in the national interest. The Shadow Chancellor asked for further details in a number of areas. Discussions are ongoing across a range of government departments, including the Treasury, with the United States, and I will be meeting US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shortly. Beyond tariffs, of course, we are discussing a range of different areas, but the focus is on reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, with a particular focus on those sectors that are subject to the higher tariffs. Because although the 10% tariffs are lower than many other countries around the world, and we welcome that, the additional tariffs on cars, on steel, and potentially on life sciences pose a real challenge to our country, because those are some of our biggest export markets. It's why we made the announcements that we made yesterday, but in those sectors, automotives, life sciences and steel, we will continue to take the action that is necessary, working in partnership with business and also with trade unions to make sure that we are addressing those issues. We are also using institutions like the British Business Bank, the National Wealth Fund and UK Export Finance to help businesses through these times. The Shadow Chancellor also mentioned concerns around dumping. We, of course, are working with international colleagues around the world to understand those implications. But our first priority is not to create more trade barriers, but to reduce the ones that exist today.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People up and down the country will be incredibly concerned about what Trump's trade war means for their living standards and for their communities as well. But at the same time, people want to show that Britain is not going to take Donald Trump's trade tariffs lying down. We welcome the Chancellor's announcement that the government will be working further and faster with our allies abroad, and I would ask the Chancellor to confirm that any new trade deals will be brought before this House for a vote before they are ratified. But, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, what I want to ask the Chancellor is whether, at the same time as working with our allies abroad to create new export markets, will the Chancellor and the government commit to a Buy British campaign as part of a broader national effort to encourage people to buy British here at home?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for those questions. This is a time for pragmatism and cool heads, and not a Russia response. We are working closely with business. My right honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, announced in the House last week a call for evidence in terms of the response that business are looking for, because ratcheting up barriers to trade, ratcheting up tariffs will not be in our country's interest, whether that's in inflation or indeed for supply chains. So I think we do need to have cool heads and think about the national interest, not knee-jerk reactions. In terms of doing deals with other countries around the world, that is something we're very much focused on. There's the EU-UK summit on the 18th of May. We are hosting the Economic and Financial Dialogue with Minister Sitaraman coming to London today for those conversations, and those discussions are ongoing with a number of countries. Of course, any treaties would be brought forward for ratification by this House. In terms of buying British, I think everyone will make their own decisions. What we don't want to see is a trade war with Britain becoming inward-looking, because if every country in the world decided that they only wanted to buy things produced in their country, that is not a good way forward. Our country has benefited hugely from access to global markets, and we will continue to want to be able to do that, because that is in our national interest for working people and for businesses in this country.
Questions. Paul Wall.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, closing the tax gap and making sure everyone is paying the tax they owe is one of the government's top priorities. The budget in autumn marked a step change in ambition to close the tax gap with the most ambitious package ever. The government built on this spring statement, taking the total additional gross tax revenue raised per year to £7.5 billion by 2029-30.
Paul Wall.
Speaker, the UK tax gap grew by a shocking £5 billion in 2023 in the dying days of the Conservatives, and former Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi was actually sacked for failing to declare an HMRC investigation into his own tax affairs. So can I welcome the Treasury's crackdown on tax avoidance? And does he agree that the Labour's prudence with a purpose will be shown by investing those taxes in child poverty strategy this summer?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his remarks, and he's right to say that the £7.5 billion of additional revenue from closing the tax gap is, of course, a huge boost to the public finances, which enables us to responsibly fund public services and deliver key priorities. Those priorities include, of course, free breakfast clubs at all primary schools in England, the first 750 of which are beginning this month via our early adopters scheme, worth £450 to children's parents and carers. To go further, the government will bring forward its comprehensive child poverty strategy as soon as possible.
The steps the government is taking to address concerns of overseas companies evading VAT on online sales by fraudulently registering UK addresses.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and at spring statement he will have seen the government set out progress on autumn budget measures to tackle a range of sources of tax avoidance and of the tax gap. That includes, of course, prosecuting more fraudsters, introducing a new HMRC reward scheme for informants, tackling phoenicism, and, of course, tackling the offshore non-tax tax gap. The offshore non-compliance tax gap.
Deirdre Costigan.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Growth is the #1 priority of this government, and that is why at the autumn budget and at the spring statement we unlocked an additional £113 billion for capital spending compared with the plans that we inherited from the previous government. Yesterday we announced significant support both for the automotive sector and life sciences. And ahead of the spending review in June, we've announced the rollout of additional 60,000 places in construction skills so we can build the homes and the infrastructure that our country desperately needs.
Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To drive progress on our growth mission and get the most out of taxpayers' money, it's vital that departments work collaboratively and not at odds with each other. So can the Chancellor outline how she is promoting cross-departmental working and planning as part of the spending review?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and the Chief Secretary is working closely with colleagues in a constructive way to bring together clusters of colleagues to discuss some of the pressing issues that span across government departments that no one government department can address on its own, whether that is SEND reform for early years or indeed tackling issues around homelessness and the cost of temporary accommodation. So we're working cross-government to address some of these cross-cutting issues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's absolutely right to focus on increasing economic growth. So please can she explain to me why my office is still waiting on a response on behalf of a small business to a letter I sent on the 12th of December asking her to look into the impact of her national insurance rise on small businesses. We asked for an update on the 11th of February. I raised a point of order on the 10th of March and I still haven't had a response. Please can she get a response to me as soon as possible?
I will follow up on that issue, but for the smallest businesses, those employing the equivalent of 4 people on the national living wage will be paying no national insurance at all from this April. So for the smallest businesses, up to 1 million businesses, they'll be paying less or the same national insurance to what they were paying previously.
Shall the Select Committee, Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since the spring statement, the world has been rocked by the announcements by President Trump on tariffs last week. It's an event that is as significant as the financial crisis of 2008 or indeed, perhaps as COVID. In those instances, the state unleashed everything it could to try and resolve those issues. Is the Chancellor considering changing any of her rules in order to make sure that everything that the state can throw at this problem is being done?
I think it is incredibly important to retain cool heads at this moment. Tariffs have been imposed, and we are working closely with our friends and counterparts in the United States to reduce the impact on those, not just in the UK, but around the world as well. At the same time, as I said in my opening remarks, we're looking to secure better trading relationships with some of our biggest trading partners around the world. Of course, as we did yesterday, we are looking at some of the sectoral responses on life sciences, on automotives, on steel as well. But the fiscal rules are very important for giving our country the stability it needs. We saw what happened when the previous government lost control of the public finances. It resulted in interest rates going through the roof, meaning higher costs for businesses and for working families. We won't make those mistakes. That's why the fiscal rules are non-negotiable, and stability for this government is sacrosanct.
Tim Farron.
Mr. Speaker, isn't now absolutely the right time to start trying to make our own look? And in that light, wouldn't this also be the right time for the Chancellor to give the green light to the upgrade to the A66 between Penrith and Scotch Corner? This is an A road where 25% of all the traffic is freight. That's twice the average for A roads across the country. Outrageous that so much of that is single carriageway. So wouldn't this be great for the economy as well as saving lives if she gave that a green light today?
Impressive. So we'll be considering all of these schemes as part of the spending review, but I absolutely do agree with the honourable gentleman that we need to go further and faster to grow our economy. That's why we are spending £113 billion more on capital investment in this Parliament compared to the plans that we inherited, which means that we can upgrade more roads, more rail lines, more energy infrastructure, and build the 1.5 million homes our country needs too.
Shadow Minister Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the Spring Statement rushed through changes to disability benefits, or pocket money, to the Chief Secretary to help plug the £14 billion gap in public finances created by the first Labour budget. Now we are already in the OBR's Scenario 2 on tariffs, and the Chancellor is once again forecast to be out of room on her fiscal targets. Therefore, how does she plan to ask the Chief Secretary to update departmental budgets in his multi-year spending review to avoid punishing businesses and people once again with further taxes?
I think the honourable gentleman is somewhat jumping the gun. We delivered the Spring Statement just 2 weeks ago, and we were able to restore the fiscal headroom in that after the change in global bond yields. We will set out the budget in the autumn, moving to one fiscal event a year, very, very different from the multiple budgets we had from the previous government. But we've set the spending totals for the spending review, and we'll be setting out the departmental allocations on June the 11th.
Andrew George.
Question 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while short-term lets and second homes can benefit the tourist economy, we also recognise that they can impact the availability and affordability of main homes in some communities. That is why we have enabled councils to charge a premium of up to 100% on the council tax bills of second homes, why we have increased the higher rates of stamp duty land tax on the purchase of second homes, and we have abolished the furnished holiday lets tax regime.
Andrew George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for that response, but I believe we can go further. This isn't about the politics of envy, but the politics of social justice. Sure, it cannot be right that, for example, in Cornwall, over £500 million of taxpayers' money through the small business rate relief system has gone into the pockets of holiday homeowners in the last 10 years, and many of those have indeed flipped their second homes into the small business rating system in order to take advantage of the loophole. Would the Minister be prepared to meet with me so that we can find a more equitable way of spending public money which goes into first homes rather than second homes?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks then, and I do agree with him very much on the importance of taking the right action to tackle second homes. I understand he had a meeting with Minister for Housing and Planning last week, and I'd be happy to follow up any items which arose from that. I would also add that as part of our plan to build more homes, that includes 4,500 new homes every year in Cornwall, and I hope he'll support those building plans too.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I wish to add my voice as an MP from Cornwall to say that some of the actions the government has taken so far on second homes have been really helpful. And of course, the Renters' Rights Bill will help with those evictions when people are flipping their houses. I would also ask that we look at the loophole between council tax and business rates, and of course that registration or licensing scheme on second homes, which the government will hopefully be bringing in soon.
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her comments as well, and I appreciate the concerns, Mr Speaker, that second homeowners may move to the business rate system. I would emphasise that there are requirements which must be met before properties can be assessed for business rates, and these have recently been strengthened, but of course we will keep that under review.
Dr Rupert.
Mr Speaker, number 4, please.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister have set out our ambitions to build 1.5 million homes this Parliament as part of our plan for change. At the spring statement, I announced steps towards this ambition with an additional £2 billion investment in social and affordable housing next year as a down payment on further investment at the spending review in June.
Dr Rupert.
I welcome the Chancellor's build, build, build policy. But with £4 million a day being the cost of temporary housing in London, soaring rents and a frozen local housing allowance, no wonder London councils fear going bankrupt and having to rehouse people from outside the capital where only 5% of homes are affordable. So can my right honourable friend, in the comprehensive spending review, look into possibly uprating this stingy Tory legacy so that Londoners aren't forced out of London?
Yeah.
The key thing we need to do is build the homes our country desperately needs. That's why I put £600 million of investment into creating 60,000 additional places for people to learn the construction skills, good jobs, paying decent wages, building the homes that we need. And it's also why we're reforming the planning system so that we can actually get those homes built, backing the builders, not the blockers, which is what the party opposite did.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the weekend, The Times revealed the problems in the retirement housing market, both in terms of new builds but also with resales, with many constituents of mine in mid-Sussex experiencing a loss on the houses or flats that they've inherited. Does the Chancellor consider that the housing market is adequately providing decent, affordable homes for those who are downsizing as well as for first-time buyers?
Very good.
Thank the Honourable Lady for that question. I'll be very happy to arrange a meeting for her with the relevant minister to discuss some of those specific issues around those retirement properties. But the Honourable Lady makes a really important point that we do need to make it easier for people to downsize, to free up those properties, including in the private sector, so there's more homes available for families.
Food.
Number 5, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Securing economic growth across the country is the government's #1 mission, and we're working in partnership with the Mayor of the North East, providing the North East Combined Authority with an integrated funding settlement from 26-27 and working with them on their local growth plan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Combined Authority has identified a key growth corridor sweeping across my constituency, but a historic lack of investment to upgrade the Moor Farm and Seaton Burn roundabouts causes relentless disruption. It holds back growth, investment, opportunity. There's a business plan, it's in the North East Growth Plan and road investment strategy. Does the Minister agree that this is exactly the sort of scheme this Labour government should support to boost economic growth in every region?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government is committed to improving roads. We agreed a £4.8 billion settlement for national highways and funded a £500 million uplift for local roads in this financial year. Funding for the RIS3 programme that she mentioned will be considered in phase 2 of the spending review, and I'd encourage her to continue to engage with the Roads Minister on this issue.
I presume Mr Lamont thinks it's North East Scotland rather than North East of England. John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government decided to cancel the A1 upgrade, which will harm the economy not just in the North East of England, but in the south of Scotland. What economic impact assessment did the government take before deciding to cancel this vital road link?
Nice try. In terms of North East growth, I've already said that we're working very closely with the Mayor of the North East, and I suggest that he asks questions about roads in transport questions relevant to his part of the country.
I now call the Minister to answer Alistair Carmichael's question on the potential impact of changes to the agricultural property relief and business property relief on farmers, which was omitted in error from the earlier versions of the order paper. So can I... Alistair Carmichael.
Speaker.
Oh, right.
Sir. Yes. Right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister with responsibility for the UK tax system, I have had several meetings with organisations on this matter since the autumn budget last year. On February the 18th, the Minister for Food Security, Rural Affairs and I met with the National Farmers Union, the Tenant Farmers Association, the Country Land and Business Association, the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers, Ulster's Farmers Union, NFU Cymru, NFU Scotland and the Farmers Union of Wales.
Alistair Carmichael.
I thank the Chancellor's human shield for that answer. But I have to say that the fact that the Chancellor sitting on the Treasury bench wasn't prepared to stand up and answer for herself demonstrates a distinct lack of respect bordering on contempt for her farmers. Will she not meet the farming unions, the banks, the professional organisations, even the supermarkets themselves, to hear why they all think that her calculations are wrong? If the Minister wants to ask her before he stands up, I'm sure we'll all allow him a second or two.
Not the most dignified question from the right honourable gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I, on the Chancellor's behalf, have met numerous organisations about this matter, including those I listed a moment ago, including the right honourable gentleman himself when he came to the Treasury to meet me, and, of course, extensive debates in this place. Mr. Speaker, we may not agree on the way forward, but I don't think anyone can accuse us of not having listened.
Good job.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Increasing investment, both public and private, in the UK is the government's absolute priority. It is the route to restarting badly needed productivity and wage growth. As the honourable member will know, at the International Investment Summit, companies committed to a record-breaking £63 billion worth of investments. This is set to help create around 30,000 jobs.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for that answer, and particularly that it's their top priority, because on the 17th of October, the government announced that they had got this £63 billion, and we've heard from the Chancellor that she's going to act decisively. So I just want to check her track record on that. You've had 6 months, you've had £63 billion. How much money has gone out of the door for those oven-ready projects across the country?
Thank you for that question. Now, I'm a very good colleague of ministers and will be excited to know that the Business Secretary will be announcing that some projects are already in the ground, shovels going into the ground in the coming weeks. And what I'm not going to do is preempt that today.
Matt Weston.
In a recent PwC survey, it showed that the UK is now the second most attractive investment destination amongst global chief executives, ahead of countries such as China, Germany and India. This shows that the government's careful stewardship of our economy has led to stability amongst the global landscape. Does the Chancellor agree with me that the UK is now open for business after years of Conservative chaos?
Well, my honourable friend consistently asks good questions that go to the heart of the matter. If I look back over the last 14 years, what I see is that British business investment has been the lowest in the G7 year after year, and we are going to put that right.
Sonny Callison.
Question 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The growth mission is the central mission of this government. At the budget, we delivered a £1.1 billion cash increase to the transport budget for 2025-26 compared to 24-25, representing a 1.5% real terms increase. We will set out further spending plans for transport in June.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What value does my right honourable friend expect the recently announced and much anticipated Portishead and Pill railway line will add to the local economy of my constituency of North Somerset?
Firstly, can I congratulate my honourable friend for his campaigning on this issue and declare that as the neighbouring constituency there may be some indirect benefit for my constituents. But I can confirm to the House that the project supports both regional and national strategic objectives. The West of England is the most productive city region outside of London and is set to continue to grow. An efficient and reliable rail link between Bristol and Portishead will support a range of large and small sites for housing and employment across the region, halving journey times and opening a wide range of job and leisure opportunities for the residents of North Somerset.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If steel production ceases or is curtailed at the Scunthorpe Steel Works, there will be a massive impact on the wider economy in northern Lincolnshire. Could the Minister give an assurance that contingency plans, including improvements to transport infrastructure, are in place should the worst happen?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and we recognise how important this issue is for his constituency, the region, and indeed the national economy. My ministerial colleagues in the Department for Business and Trade are in discussions on this particular issue, but as he would expect in our infrastructure strategy, we're considering the best value for aligning investments between housing, rail, energy and other types of infrastructure to deliver growth for everyone in every region of the country.
Shadow Minister Gareth Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the Energy Secretary is against airport expansion unless it's in Doncaster. And we know that many Labour MPs are against airport expansion unless it's in Pakistan. To be fair, at least the Chancellor wants airport expansion actually in this country. But at the same time, she's jacking up air passenger duty by as much as 16%. Only this Chancellor could be pro-airport but anti-passenger. Labour's Climate Change Committee want to see air passenger numbers fall by 2030. Does he?
Minister.
No.
Van der Bescher.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. The National Wealth Fund has had constructive meetings with all of our mayors, and we have given a mandate to the National Wealth Fund to work with mayors on tailored offers for their communities. I'm meeting with Mayor Andy Burnham later today to take forward that shared objective to ensure that growth is generated everywhere and felt in all parts of our country.
Van der Bescher.
Mr. Speaker, as a fellow North Western MP, I'm sure you will share my pride that the banks of River Mersey were the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and my constituency of Stockport continues to be a hub for innovation. We have many fantastic businesses in Stockport, including KNDS and the Heatons. They manufacture military bridging systems and the Boxer armoured vehicle for the British Army. Can the Minister outline how the National Wealth Fund will fuel economic growth in Stockport and also the investment we need in our local infrastructure?
I thank my honourable friend. I visited Stockport with my honourable friend and with the Mayor last year to see the regeneration work that's happening there, linking new investment in housing with transport infrastructure as well. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his leadership. Last month, alongside the increase in defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, we've also set the National Wealth Fund strategic direction with a focus on support for the defence sector through dual-use technology, creating more good jobs in all parts of the country, including in Stockport.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Economic policy should benefit all regions of Britain, including rural counties like Lincolnshire, where we grow a disproportionate amount of the food that feeds the nation. So does she recognise that in an age where the two biggest economies in the world are protecting their industries, including agriculture, that the time has come to reinvest in manufacturing, to consume more of what we produce here in Britain, and to echo the Liberal Democrats' call to buy British? That means using government procurement to back British jobs, British products, British workers.
My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has set out new reforms for procurement rules to enable just that. We want more British businesses to win contracts. We want more small businesses in Britain to win contracts. Businesses in all parts of the economy, including in food and farming. And in farming, we gave a radical settlement of £5 billion in the budget last year to support this important part of our national economy.
Dr. Maria Tiffel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is currently no tram train network from central Sheffield to Outerbridge, Warncliffside, Deepcar or Stocksbridge, nor an operational train service to these areas. My constituents want to see the Sheffield tram network extended to Stocksbridge and connect these rural communities with jobs, education and hospitals, as well as supporting the advanced manufacturing district and steel plant in Stocksbridge. Ahead of the spending review, will the Minister meet with me and the Mayor of South Yorkshire to discuss the next steps to establish the Stocksbridge extension to the Sheffield tram train?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and the Chief Secretary is working closely with mayors, including Oliver Coppard, to understand their priorities for the places that they represent at the spending review in June. We'll continue that work. At the same time, as the right honourable gentleman opposite has said, we are backing the airport at Doncaster, bringing more good jobs to South Yorkshire.
Anna Sublime.
Question 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, Sammy Wilson, I forgot about him. He's not standing. Come on, Sammy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps the Chancellor could tell us what discussions he has had with the Northern Ireland Executive to ensure that the National Wealth Fund is used to promote economic growth in Northern Ireland, but does not agree that really the big impediment to growth is the fact that she's taxing businesses to death.
Yep.
Well, the Office for Budget Responsibility have revised growth up from next year, and at the end of the forecast period expect the economy to be bigger than they thought at the budget last year. We are using the National Wealth Fund, the British Business Bank and UK Export Finance to support businesses all across the UK. And just recently we were able to announce significant investment at Tariffs in Belfast to create jobs in the defence industry there for export of goods to Ukraine.
Question 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government's top priorities for pensioners are to raise the state pension and to rescue the NHS. Over 12 million pensioners saw their state pension rise by 4.1% this week, well ahead of inflation. That is worth an extra £470 a year for someone on the full new state pension and £360 a year for those on the full basic state pension.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 250 pieces of outstanding casework relating to the winter fuel payment. An elderly constituent of mine in Freeman, Somerset, emailed me this winter with a picture showing her thermometer was at 15 degrees, saying they have to stay in bed for as long as possible each day to stay warm. With energy bills now increasing, does the Minister agree that the decision to cut the winter fuel payment has already had serious consequences on the welfare of pensioners across our country?
I thank the honourable member for that question. What this government is doing is raising the state pension. It's extending the warm homes discount. It's making sure that an extra 50,000 people received access to pension credit over the course of the last 6 months. And we talk about mistakes that have had lasting consequences for pensioners. I look back to the coalition government's decision to cut by 90% the rate of energy installations under their watch. That has had a legacy that pensioners are living with day in, day out in terms of leaky homes, and this government is getting on with insulating homes right across this country.
Chris Spence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister agree with me that the increase of 4.1% to the new state pension will make a huge difference to pensioners in my constituency of Harlow? And will he detail what more the government is doing to tackle the cost of living crisis which was left by the last government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, who is a regular attendee at these questions and, in fact, every other questions as far as I can work out. He's right to say that we will do more, because we're not just increasing pensions above the rate of inflation this year. We'll be doing it throughout this Parliament, and that should see the state pension rise by up to £1,900 by the end of this Parliament.
Kim Johnson.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Liverpool City Region Combined Authority will benefit from our £900 million UK Shared Prosperity Fund to allow it to invest into local communities like my honourable friends. From the start of 2026-27, her combined authority will receive a single flexible funding pot through their integrated settlement to allow local leaders across the UK to deliver important projects for their local area, including on high streets. And to deliver on our manifesto pledge, we intend to introduce permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, including those on the high street, from 26-27.
Kim Johnson.
I thank the Minister for his response to my question, but Everton in my Liverpool Riverside constituency is the most deprived in the country, and residents have received a double blow with the imminent closure of Lloyds Bank and the planned closure of the Crown Post Office, which is going to have a devastating impact on both residents and businesses alike. So will the Minister agree to meet with me to talk about and discuss these closures and to talk about the desperate need for a banking hub in this particular area?
I thank my honourable friend, and as every constituency MP will know, these are always difficult decisions for closures of banking services on our high street. That's why the government is committed to championing access through by rolling out banking hubs across the country. We are committed to delivering 350 of those. 220 have already been announced, and the closure of the post office that my honourable friend raises will trigger a further cash access assessment for her constituency, and I'll be pleased to arrange a meeting for her with the relevant minister to look at those options for her constituency.
Is it a Liverpool overspill in Strangford? Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank the honourable lady for that. The Minister's response is really where the key answer is. The Minister's right to highlight the issues, whether it be Liverpool, Everton, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast or Strangford. The issue of opportunities. In Northern Ireland, we have done an opportunity. It's an over the shops apartment conversions. In other words, given the opportunities for housing for those. And does the honourable gentleman agree that the possibilities for regeneration of the high streets and the town centres can be done also with domestic opportunities as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a shared ambition, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our high streets are thriving communities for people that live there, shop there or work there. That's why we're delivering integrated settlement for combined authority mayors in England, and have delivered a real terms increase in funding for the Northern Ireland Executive, the largest since devolution has begun, to be able to invest in exactly those types of local projects.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following on from the honourable member for Strangford, whether it is Liverpool, Riverside, St Albans or indeed anywhere else in the country, high streets up and down the land have just been hit with the double whammy of the jobs tax and the higher business rates bills. Can ministers please set out what steps they are taking to prevent an epidemic of boarded up shop fronts in the next 12 months ahead of the new rate coming in next year?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. As I've informed the House already, we are committed to supporting independent businesses and retailers on the high street. That's why the change to employer national insurance contributions was designed in a way to support the smaller businesses in our country. They're the 50% of businesses paying the same or less than they did under the previous regime, and as she's alluded to, bringing forward permanent deductions for the retail, hospitality and leisure sector for their business rate taxations, which will be important for the long-term sustainability of the businesses she raises.
Colin Anderson.
Question 12, sir.
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. We have heard from UK businesses that our regulatory system often holds back growth and investment. We recently published a regulation action plan and committed to cut administrative costs of regulation on businesses by 25% by the end of this Parliament. We are going further and faster than ever before to streamline regulation to make Britain the best place in the world to do business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her response. She will know that both domestic and international investors are often influenced by decisions taken by multiple agencies, regulators and indeed government departments, which is why consistency is so key. So can the Minister update the House on how the Treasury is supporting cross-government, whole-of-government and whole-of-regulator approach to delivering coherent UK regulatory frameworks that strike a balance between protecting consumers and boosting the global competitiveness of the UK economy?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a whole-of-government approach, and we secured 60 commitments from key regulators to improve the business environment. The government is stripping back duplication of regulation and streamlining regulation, ultimately delivering a regulatory system that encourages new investment, innovation and growth.
Dave Doogan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inward investment projects in Scotland in 2023 grew by 12.7% compared to 6% across the rest of the United Kingdom. 2023 saw record investment in Scotland, maintaining Scotland's position as the top performing area of the UK for the 9th year running. International business wants to locate in Scotland because they understand that GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.5%, compared with 6.5% in the UK since 2007. What does the Chancellor think that her fiscal interventions since October will have on that attractiveness of Scotland as a destination? And what discussions has she had with the Scottish Government about the jeopardy she's placed our economy in?
The Chancellor delivered the biggest ever settlement for Scotland in October 2025, and I think the answer is thank you.
Mr. Mark Garnier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There is a great deal of speculation, Mr. Speaker, about the future of the cash ISA. This is an important savings mechanism, as we know, for many, many savers across the country, all of whom will be dismayed at the loss of a significant part of their cash savings opportunity. But, just as importantly, Mr. Speaker, cutting cash ISAs will deprive building societies of important funds for their balance sheets, reducing the amount of capital that will be available for the residential mortgage market. And this is the point that's been raised to me by the mutual societies. Mr. Speaker, given that this will have a profound effect on mutuals' ability to raise debt capital, what research has the government undertaken to establish the extent of the damage this measure may inflict on the residential mortgage market, not least important for all our constituents, but also crucial for the 1.5 million new homes the government is proposing to build?
I work very closely with the mutuals and other financial services firms, and I think he is slightly jumping the gun here, if he doesn't mind me saying. We are considering options to reform ISAs, but we need to get the balance right between cash and equities. We know that there are many people who have investment in cash ISAs who could think about possibly investing in our capital markets. That would be a win for them in terms of higher returns, but also for the economy. But we absolutely understand the role that cash savings has for people for a rainy day.
Diana.
Question number 13.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, helping people into good work and financial independence is at the heart of our approach to supporting people on the lowest incomes. That is why we have increased the national living wage by 6.7%, equal to £1,400 this year for someone working full-time. Our plan to make work pay will tackle the poor job security and working conditions that has been holding our economy back, and the Pathways to Work Green Paper announced an additional £1 billion investment in employment, health and skills support.
It's all very well for the Minister to talk about helping people into work, but is he aware of the many millions of people on PIP who rely on that PIP to work, and yet it's the PIP that is going to be slashed as a consequence of the Spring Statement? And is he aware also that there are very many people that would prefer the government, rather than balancing its books on some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society, why is it rejecting a tax of just 2% on people with assets over 10 million, which would raise over 24 billion?
Mr. Speaker, at the autumn budget last year, the Chancellor announced a series of reforms to fix the public finances in as fair a way as possible, making sure the wealthiest in our society pay their fair share of tax. The welfare reforms announced at Spring Statement are principled reforms to help get people back into work, because work is the best way out of poverty, whilst also providing that support for those who need it and making sure the system is sustainable for the future.
Frank.
Earlier this year I spoke to my local CAP debt support team in Guildford, and they explained to me how they're supporting many low-income individuals out of debt who no sooner as they are out of debt they start accruing it again because universal credit is insufficient to cover their basic needs due to the cost of living in an area like Guildford. What work has the Minister done to assess whether universal credit levels are sufficient to cover the varied and increasing basic living costs across the country and preventing people from the lowest incomes from going further into difficulty and debt?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has already taken action with respect to the fair repayment rate, which lowers the cap of deductions on universal credit to 15% from 25% that it was before the autumn budget last year. That will benefit 1.2 million households by an average of £420 a year, including 700,000 of the poorest families with children benefiting as a result of that change.
Shadow Minister James White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Businesses have just been hit by the Chancellor's £25 billion jobs tax, which will cost working families £3,500, as well as nearly doubling business rates for hospitality and retail businesses. How does imposing taxes that the OBR say will result in lower wages, higher prices and fewer jobs help growth and those on the lowest incomes? And will the Chancellor keep her promise not to come back with more taxes in this Parliament?
Mr Speaker, the Shadow Minister talks about business rate support, and I might remind him that if we had carried on with the plans inherited from the party opposite, business rates relief would have ended entirely this month. It is only thanks to the decision of this government that rates relief is continuing for this year, ahead of permanent reforms, permanently lower tax rates of retail, hospitality and leisure premises on the High Street from April 2026. That is thanks to a decision this government has made.
Question 14, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Sorry, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, with permission, I would like to answer this question together with, I think, question 24, but I've lost track slightly of the 19, in fact. That's a great suggestion, Mr Speaker. May I take you up on that? Mr Speaker, the government is committed to making sure the wealthiest in our society pay their fair share of tax, and that is why the Chancellor announced a series of reforms at Autumn Budget 2024 to help fix the public finances in as fair a way as possible. These included increasing the rates of capital gains tax, increasing air passenger duty for private jets, and raising stamp duty for buyers of second or more homes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Analysis from a number of disability groups shows that the Pathways to Work Green Paper will have a detrimental effect on over 3 million people. Polling from Oxfam shows that 77% of the public would rather the UK government increase taxes on the very richest rather than cut the benefits of the poorest in society. Shouldn't we, therefore, be looking at raising funds from those with the broadest shoulders?
Mr Speaker, as I made clear in my earlier response, the government's already made changes to make the tax system fairer and make sure the wealthiest pay their fair share. The reforms to the welfare system are principled reforms to tackle the perverse incentives that encourage inactivity. We need to be supporting those in most need, getting people back into work wherever possible, and protecting the sustainability of the welfare system.
Mr Speaker, and let's be frank and let's not spin it. For 14 years we have seen austerity that has ripped the heart out of communities, and then we had a global pandemic where inequality was accelerated, and we still are feeling the effects of a cost of living crisis that is making ordinary people poorer. The public don't want cuts, they don't want austerity. What they do want is an annual wealth tax on the very wealthiest in society. Isn't it time that we have a government that does something different, gives people what they want and is willing to redistribute wealth for the benefit of many in society and improve living standards?
Mr Speaker, I politely suggest if my honourable friend thinks that we are imposing austerity, he hasn't read the budget very carefully. There are increases to revenue spending in all departments. There are across the public spending envelope. There is an increase in capital investment. We're making sure that we're building for the future whilst protecting our fiscal rules. And let me be clear, Mr Speaker, those fiscal rules are not a nice-to-have addition to the way that we approach the economy. Fiscal irresponsibility has a huge cost, as we saw under the previous government.
Mr Speaker, we support the government in trying to determine a fair level of tax, especially amongst the very wealthy. But would he agree that in determining the possibility of a wealth tax, would he establish, if they can, the number of people that may leave the country as a result of that and therefore pay no income tax whatsoever?
Well, Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman makes an important point that we need to make sure the wealthiest in society pay their fair share, whilst also making sure that we attract talent from around the world to come to the UK, to work here, to invest and to help grow our economy, because it is on the back of that investment and that economic growth that will make people across the UK better off by getting more money in their pockets.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Number 15, Mr Speaker.
Sir Julian Smith.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer this question together with number 16. The government understands the importance of in-person banking to communities. We're working closely with the industry to roll out 350 banking hubs across the UK. Over 220 hubs have already been announced and over 135 of those are already open.
Sir Julian Smith.
Rural communities such as Settle in North Yorkshire are really struggling from this loss of face-to-face banking services. Link hubs one route for them to replace banks that are closing. Could I urge ministers to do what they can, I accept it's an independent organisation, with Link to help them relax the criteria
for rural communities, allowing them more face-to-face banking services?
I thank him for that question. I'd be very happy to meet if there was a specific banking hub that had been considered that he'd like to discuss. We do work very, very closely with Link. He will know under his government, under FSMA 2023, the legislation was passed that Link and the financial service sector and the FCA ultimately have the power over the criteria, and that's not something that we're planning to change.
Lewis Cocking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does the Minister plan to make it easier to establish banking hubs in our communities where we've lost all of the banks? Now, I did have a meeting with the previous Minister, but she left government before that meeting could take place. Would the Minister agree to meet with me so I can discuss about a banking hub in my constituency of Broxbourne, in particular the town of Cheshunt?
Always happy to meet colleagues and happy to meet the honourable gentleman.
Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The criteria that's applied by Link is too strict, and banks are being unable to walk away from their customers. And in autumn, we've had a salami slicing process of banks gradually leaving the high street, but because we have a building society, we can't ask for a hub. Would you undertake to review this, the Link's approach to this, because it is leaving customers with difficulties in actually carrying out their banking businesses?
As I said in my previous answer, we don't have any plans to change the Link criteria. That is a matter for Link. But there are some flexibilities in the way that they apply this criteria, depending on the local population, travel times to nearby bank branches, and indeed the number of small businesses in an area. So I would be happy to meet with my honourable friend if that is something of concern to him.
Come to Topicals, Douglas McCullers.
Please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and you shocked me by moving to topicals so quickly that I've now found my page ready to be able to answer them. From ferries to the National Care Service, we've seen failure after failure from the SNP in Scotland, including a track record of waste. In contrast, this Labour government is tackling waste and investing in frontline services like our National Health Service, which has seen waiting lists for every month for the past 5 months in England. We hope that the people of Scotland will soon have the opportunity to experience such transformation.
Douglas McCullers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor set out a clear plan to drive better value for taxpayers in the spring statement, including through the Transformation Fund, which will transform frontline delivery while making savings in the long term. Does the Chancellor agree with me that this is in stark contrast to the SNP Scottish Government's record of waste?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. As he knows, we've given the Scottish Government the largest increase in spending since devolution began, and the people of Scotland expect that money to be spent well, as we are in England, in transforming public services, improving the National Health Service. But they may have to know, given the SNP are not here in the Chamber today, that they'll need to elect a Labour government in Scotland later next year.
So the Chancellor Melstrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was obvious to many before the emergency budget that the President of the United States was going to be slapping tariffs on our exports. So could I ask the Chancellor why it was that she came forward at the emergency budget with a recklessly slender sliver of headroom, the same headroom that she had at the time of the autumn budget, which proved then to be entirely inadequate. She blew it and more due to her disastrous economic choices.
I'm sorry to disappoint the Shadow Chancellor, but because of the ordering of questions, he's stuck with me, I'm afraid. But to answer his question, he will have seen that at the budget, we increased the fiscal headroom back to our agreement of £9.9 billion, which was more than the headroom that we'd inherited from the party opposite. The key difference is this is a government that takes economic and political stability importantly, because when you lose control of the economy, you lose control of family finances, and ultimately you end up in opposition.
Just to correct the record, the order paper has not changed at all in topicals.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're quite right about that, as you are about everything. And indeed, the right honourable gentleman is completely wrong when he says he inherited less headroom than was the case at the autumn budget. He inherited on the current budget £23 billion. He took it down to 9.9 to be precise. And he also loosened the fiscal targets, which is why he's not underwater already on the targets that we had when we were in government. But could I ask him, the fiscal targets are looking under a great deal of pressure come the autumn. There's a great deal of speculation and uncertainty amongst businesses as to whether this will lead to tax increases. Could he take away that uncertainty now, particularly given the tariffs and all the uncertainty that is vested in that, to make it clear at that dispatch box there will be no further increases in taxation on businesses this Parliament?
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. It was our ordering that caused the problem, not the ordering of questions in the House. The Right Honourable Gentleman knows the tax decisions are taken at the budget, but we've been very clear that we are working hand in glove with businesses to be able to bring growth back to the economy and to ensure investment is coming forward, private sector and public sector. And he will know from his time of swimming underwater, this government is taking a different approach to fiscal discipline that I think he should welcome.
Catherine Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The defence sector is a vital part of our local economy in Derby, particularly with the landmark £9 billion deal struck with Rolls-Royce, supporting the Royal Navy's submarines and providing a major jobs boost. Does the Chancellor agree that national security goes hand in hand with economic security and, in turn, financial security for households?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. The first duty of any government is to keep the nation safe, and that is why we're increasing defence spending as a share of GDP to 2.5%, the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And of course, Derby has a vital role to play within the UK's defence sector, particularly in nuclear engineering and aerospace, as demonstrated by the landmark £9 billion deal with Rolls-Royce, which will create up to 1,000 jobs in the city and protect thousands more.
The Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the fast action by the government to convene the automotive industry in reaction to President Trump's damaging tariffs, but the measures in and of themselves won't create new export markets or stimulate demand here in the UK. So could I ask ministers whether they will look at Liberal Democrat calls to reintroduce the plug-in car grant, equalise VAT for EV pavement charging, and will the government instruct the Valuation Office to scrap business rates for EV charging bays until the transition is complete?
We announced support which was very much welcomed by the automotive sector yesterday around the phase-out of internal combustion engine cars, giving much more flexibility around the allowances, more flexibilities around plug-in hybrid vehicles. All of that is welcome, but of course we're keeping a watching brief, as well as trying to ensure that there are new markets for cars made in Britain in other countries around the world by securing more trade deals.
Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the Chancellor doing to support businesses and to boost wages in towns like Burnley, Padiham and Briarfield, forgotten by 14 years of the previous government?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he's doing great work supporting local businesses in Burnley, including the digital marketing start-up Door4, which I know that he's been championing.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been contacted by many local businesses, including the Cross Keys pub in the Holt Heath National Reserve and the Bear Cafe in Wimborne. 2 different venues, 2 different locations, both telling me that these are the most extreme trading conditions seen in hospitality ever. With national insurance, minimum wage and energy and food costs, will the Chancellor consider a reduction on VAT on hospitality sales to protect high streets, local producers and save our communities?
Mr. Speaker, I'm unclear if the Honourable Lady is opposed to the increase in the national minimum wage from her remarks just then, but she should know that we've extended support for businesses in terms of business rates relief this year, which would have ended entirely under the plans that we inherited from the previous government, ahead of permanently lower multipliers for retail, hospitality and leisure premises on the High Street from April 2026.
And Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a North London MP, I know that tackling the high housing costs in this city is a priority for my constituents, and it's my belief that one route to doing that is to invest in the country as a whole, so we're not just flying on one London-shaped engine. To that end, Mr. Speaker, did you know that Leeds is the largest city in Western Europe that doesn't have a tram or a mass transit system? And that is a damning indictment on decades of economic failure. And I would like to ask the Chancellor, will she do all she can to make sure the Leeds tram can be built as fast as possible so that her constituents and mine can be better off?
Here, here. I better declare an interest as a proud Member of Parliament for Leeds West and Pudsey. West Yorkshire Combined Authority is receiving £830 million for transport spending through round 1 of the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement, including £200 million for the development of a mass transport system. It's been too long that Leeds has lacked this. Under this government, we'll put that investment in and get those trams running.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the jobs tax, the increases in business rates and as a result of US tariffs, it's vital to stimulate the UK economy. So what is the Chancellor's plan, and can she expect us to see interest rates fall? Perhaps if she was listening to the question, Mr. Speaker, she'd be able to answer.
Mr. Speaker, I think that was a question about business rates reform, and as the Honourable Lady will know, we published a discussion paper on transforming business rates, which I'm sure the Right Honourable Lady will have read and responded to. I'll look out for her consultation response in what we've received. But transforming business rates, Mr. Speaker, is about making sure that we make the business rate system fit for the future to support investment and business growth right across the UK.
Dr. Alison-Garden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Chancellor join me in congratulating Goodwin International, who are building a multi-million-pound production unit in Newstead in Stoke-on-Trent South, creating up to 100 jobs in defence manufacturing? And does the Chancellor agree that increased investment in defence spending will have a tangible impact on people in my constituency, fuelling jobs and local investment?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and can I congratulate my honourable friend for championing jobs and businesses in her constituency. As she knows, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have confirmed that defence spending will increase to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, and that a minimum of 10% of the Ministry of Defence equipment budget will now be spent on novel technologies like drones and AI, which will create highly skilled jobs and drive benefits to the wider economy, including in her constituency of Stoke-on-Trent South.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Earlier on in questions, in response to my honourable friend for Grantham and Bourne, the Chief Secretary rejected Labour's Climate Change Committee's advice regarding aviation policy, and also goes directly against what the Energy Secretary had committed to. Who in government should we believe when it comes to aviation policy?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows that we are supporting airport expansion alongside investment in things like sustainable aviation fuel to be able to reduce carbon emissions from long-haul flight, as well as supporting investment into decarbonised surface transport to help people to get around the country and to their airports. I think maybe the members opposite might want to welcome investment into this country as opposed to talking it down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask the Chancellor if she will introduce a 12-month delay to the incoming change in taxation to double cab pick-up trucks. The manufacturers and the commercial customers feel they haven't had the sufficient time to adjust to the new changes this month. Would you be able to share with us any impact assessment work carried out on the reclassification of double cab pickups, what effect it would have on the sector in Britain?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. But, Mr. Speaker, we've engaged with the automotive sector on this issue, and there are generous transitional arrangements in place to mitigate the impact. The government has had to take difficult decisions, but at the autumn budget 2024, we prioritise long-term support for growth-driving sectors, including over £2 billion over 5 years to support the automotive sector.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ineffective energy trading with the EU is a major barrier for global investors. According to Energy UK, we are losing out on £30 billion of investments in interconnectors alone. What will the government do to improve our energy trading with the EU to unlock this vital opportunity?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Plan for Change sets out our ambitious but achievable target of clean power by 2030. The Clean Hour Action Plan demonstrates the significant investment requirements to reach this target, including in renewable infrastructure and the actions we will take to facilitate this. We've already taken action to remove the de facto ban on onshore wind in England, approved major solar projects and delivered a record-breaking renewables auction.
Josh Fenton-Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last government left 4.5 million children in poverty, but like many colleagues, I'm alarmed that the impact assessment of the Spring Statement suggests that that number will rise, not fall. So can the Minister tell me when we can expect the results of the Child Poverty Task Force, and will it be delivered in time to influence decisions in the spending review?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. He knows that the government is committed to reducing child poverty and that we'll be bringing forward a child poverty strategy later this year. It will look at levers which support households to increase their income, such as supporting parents into secure employment, supporting progression in the labour market and considering social security reforms. And I can confirm the work of the task force is feeding into the spending review.
Nick Timothy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor talked earlier about the government's response to the new US trade policy. But what is the government doing about China's abuse of the world trade system? In particular, what will the government do to challenge China's status as a developing country at the WTO? Because this is the means by which China dodges so many of the rules imposed on countries like Britain and others in the West.
We're going to have a meeting. Chancellor.
Well, trade issues are for the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, but I would say this. There are rightly concerns around global trade imbalances, but the response of the United States by putting tariffs on all countries, including the UK, that does not have a trade surplus, I think is a disproportionate response to a genuine problem of global trade imbalances.
Bill Lesterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the Chancellor's commitment to investing in life sciences in this country. So can I encourage her to support the bid for a national mental health diagnostics and research centre in my constituency, not least as it costs this country on estimates up to £300 billion a year in lost economic production as a result of poor mental health?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And yesterday, the Prime Minister announced reforms to speed up clinical trials to ensure that the best new drugs can come to this country, benefiting from our NHS. On the specific issue around mental health treatment, I very much agree with my honourable friend about the importance of addressing these issues, both for the health and well-being of individuals, but also because of the economic benefit that he speaks to. I'd be very happy to arrange a meeting with the relevant minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the 30th of October, the Chancellor upended our economy through tax rises and punitive death taxes. She has delivered a devastating blow to family farms and small family businesses, the very backbone of our economy. When will the Chancellor recognise that she is elected by the people, for the people? Every day she avoids engaging with the farming community is another day of willful neglect. Our farmers are being driven out not by market forces, but by a government blind to their struggles and deaf to their voices. When will she listen and speak with them?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady and I have discussed in several debates in recent months, the decision we took around agricultural property relief and business property relief was a difficult decision, but it was the right balanced decision to ensure we protect family farms and small businesses whilst fixing the public finances in a fair way. And fixing the public finances is in the interest of every member of this House and all of the constituents we represent, because it underpins the investment that we're putting into the future of this country and to getting the economy growing.
Joanna Baxter.
Mr. Speaker, many thousands of my constituents in Paisley and Renfrewshire South work in public services, rely on public services, which are on their knees after 18 years of underinvestment by the SNP government at Holyrood. Can my right honourable friend set out how their views will be reflected in the spending review?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. And because of the decisions that we made in the budget last year, we were able to provide a record settlement for Scotland, for Wales and indeed for Northern Ireland. It's a shame that the SNP government, the SNP MPs are not in the chamber today, but it is now their responsibility to spend that money wisely and invest in public services. We are bringing down NHS waiting lists in England and Wales. The same can't be said for Scotland.
Tessa Munn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July 2023, my constituent Alison claimed a refund of overpaid but mistakenly paid twice tax. In February 24, she was told her claim would be assessed by the 20th of March. In July 24, she was told 22nd of October. In December, she was told she couldn't have a date, but the department had definitely received her claim 16 months previously. She's heard nothing since. Can the Chancellor agree to meet with me to discuss this very vexed situation for someone who has very little money, and this claim is nearly 21 months delayed?
Mr. Speaker, I was sorry to hear about the Honourable Lady's constituents' experience. I assume she's referring to with HMRC in her question there. Whilst as the Minister with responsibility for HMRC, I can't get involved directly in individual cases, I'm happy to raise it with HMRC and make sure that they give it proper attention to try and resolve it.
They are bleating.
Bobby Shank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Local businesses have huge potential to create local growth in our community. It was fantastic earlier this year to see my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, visiting Derby South, engaging with these business leaders. Does the Minister agree that continued engagement with business leaders is absolutely key to building the business confidence that we so desperately need and was shattered by the previous government?
I thank my honourable friend for his question and for the invitation to join him in his constituency. I enjoy very much the regional reception with business leaders, as I have done in every region and nation across the country during this spending review. We'll continue to work hand in glove with them to unlock investment, create jobs and create growth for everybody across the whole country.
Jim Allister.
Mr. Speaker, earlier when the Chancellor was talking about the impact of tariffs, she pledged that the government would act in our national interest. How can it be in the whole national interest, so long as the trade laws governing Northern Ireland are not the trade laws of the UK, but those of a foreign jurisdiction, the EU?
Got a statement, shortly.
Well, of course, we inherited the settlement made by the previous government. As the honourable member will know, there is a summit between the UK and the EU on the 18th of May where we're looking to reduce the barriers to trade between the whole of the United Kingdom and the European Union. We recognise the specific issues around Northern Ireland, particularly in regards to the response to the tariffs, and we'll continue to work with the executive there to ensure that we get the best outcome for the people of Northern Ireland.
That completes questions. The Chancellor of the Exchequer will let the front benches change over. Right, we come to the urgent question. Alex Bogart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland if he will update the House on the likely impact of EU tariffs on the US on the Northern Irish economy.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. As the Prime Minister has said, tariffs are not good news for anyone, and no one wants a trade war. The government is doing everything possible to keep Britain secure during this new era of global instability, and it will always act in the best interests of businesses in Northern Ireland. As part of our customs territory and internal market, Northern Ireland exporters are facing a general 10% US tariff and a 25% tariff on steel, aluminium and cars, like other exporters across the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is not, therefore, uniquely disadvantaged. We are, of course, preparing for the EU's next move and any possible retaliatory tariffs that they may or may not introduce, as well as considering the impact new EU tariffs would have on Northern Ireland businesses importing from the United States of America, because under the Windsor Framework, the EU tariff would apply. As honourable members will know, however, because of the Windsor Framework, businesses can reclaim any such tariff through the existing duty reimbursement scheme in cases where US imports into Northern Ireland do not then enter the European Union. The Customs Duty Waiver Scheme also allows duties to be waived entirely, subject to an overall limit. These schemes work in our national interest, and HMRC is continuing to talk to and support any businesses that might be affected to help them understand how to use the duty reimbursement and customs duty waiver schemes. The Minister for the Cabinet Office has talked about all this with EU counterparts in recent days, because the government is fully aware of how sensitive this issue is for businesses in Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, what we need in these circumstances is a calm and considered response, and that is what the government will continue to provide.
So, Secretary of State Alex Barker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you also for granting this urgent question. It's incredibly important that this House has the opportunity to question the government on this issue before the Easter break and before the implementation of these tariffs. I have to say at the outset, I have enormous respect for my opposite numbers in the Northern Ireland office, but it is totally unacceptable that we should have gotten to this stage in proceedings without a minister coming to the House to update us on the likely impact on businesses in Northern Ireland of this emerging tariff war between the US and the EU. And this is coming, as the House will know, off the back of considerable damage done to the economy in Northern Ireland by the budget last year, by the increases in national insurance contributions and by the changes to national minimum wage, which have completely undermined business confidence and which are driving unemployment in the region. So I ask the right honourable gentleman to answer the following three questions. The first is, has the government by now, a week on from the United States announcement and sometime after the EU's publication of a 99-page of draft tariff responses, has the government done an impact assessment of what this means for the Northern Irish economy and for businesses in Northern Ireland, and will he publish it? Second, he mentions quite rightly the duty reimbursement scheme, which would allow businesses importing, taking goods from GB to NI, having to pay the EU tariff to reclaim that tariff. That scheme is now going to be put under enormous pressure. It's going to have to deal with volumes not foreseen when it was originally put together. Does the Secretary of State have complete confidence that it is going to be able to reimburse businesses in a timely fashion so as not to disrupt trade? And third and finally, because Northern Ireland remains within the EU's custom code, affected Northern Ireland businesses buying affected goods will have to pay EU tariffs. But the same competitor businesses in GB will not. What is the government going to do to ensure that such businesses are not left disadvantaged and that we don't see serious distortions of trade? And with that in mind, Mr. Speaker, will the Secretary of State confirm to the House that in the event that we see a major diversion of trade, his government will be prepared to use Article 16 of the Windsor Framework, which allows the government to take decisions to ensure that businesses in Northern Ireland are not damaged. It's incredibly important that businesses hear that from the Secretary of State that this government is prepared to protect them in the event that this tariff war creates a diversion of trade for business there.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his questions. I'm slightly surprised by his initial comment because, of course, we touched on this matter in Northern Ireland orals.
Only because I raised it.
Well, indeed, but we touched on this matter in Northern Ireland orals last week, and, of course, the Business Secretary made a statement to the House last week. To answer his questions, of course, the government has been preparing for and looking at all eventualities, but until we know what the EU retaliatory tariffs are, it doesn't make much sense to publish speculation about their potential impact. On the duty reimbursement scheme, I have met with HMRC officials because I agree with him it is very important that the scheme works effectively, depending on the number of Northern Ireland businesses that are affected to reimburse tariff. I would just say, however, that Northern Ireland imports about £800 million worth of goods from the United States of America, which is about 2% of Northern Ireland's total purchases, and therefore that impacts upon his third question. We're going to have to take this a stage at a time. The Prime Minister has made it quite clear that he will do what is in the national interest to protect our businesses and our companies and our economic future. But it is precisely because of the Windsor Framework that the duty reimbursement scheme exists.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tony Antoinette.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the EU is currently consulting its member states on the goods it may target in response to the US tariffs. The Secretary of State has spoken about maybe there being no need to make an assessment yet. But in advance of the EU imposing retaliatory measures, has he made any assessment at all, if there's any point? And is he engaging with the European Commission to ensure that the interests of Northern Ireland businesses and consumers are fully taken into account in determining how the EU responds to the US tariffs?
Secretary of State.
Well, as I indicated in answer to the opposition spokesperson, of course the government has been preparing for all eventualities. But as I also indicated, there's no point in publishing something that is not based on the actual tariffs that the EU itself decides to impose. Therefore, it is sensible to wait until that moment arrives. Secondly, the EU will take such action as it determines is in its interests in response to the 20% tariffs that the United States of America has imposed on the EU, in addition to the tariffs on steel, aluminium and cars, and because of the Windsor Framework, which, let us not forget, gives Northern Ireland businesses unique access to the European market, which is not something that's enjoyed by businesses in the rest of Great Britain.
The Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Dr Al Pinkerton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Financial Times reported at the weekend, and I think, as the Secretary of State has just confirmed, in the event of EU retaliatory tariffs, imported goods from the United States into Northern Ireland will, by default, be effectively forced down the red lane. And that, of course, means additional customs checks, time, red tape. And in the event of their imposition, EU tariff rates for goods coming into Northern Ireland, irrespective of their ultimate destination. And that risks a scenario where Northern Ireland importers are penalised more than almost any other business in either the UK or the EU, first at the border and then in administering the reclamation of those costs. Let us be clear, this chaotic situation is entirely the consequence of Donald Trump's destructive trade war. So can I ask the Secretary of State, what is the government doing to ensure that President Trump and the US administration are alert to the deeply unstabilising and destabilising effects of their tariff policy on the Good Friday Agreement and on the prospect of peace in Northern Ireland? And what active steps is the government taking to mitigate potential disruption to Northern Ireland businesses who now find themselves unwittingly caught up in Donald Trump's trade war? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Well, the single most important thing we can do for those businesses in Northern Ireland is to make sure, as I indicated a moment ago, that the duty reimbursement scheme works speedily and effectively, provided those businesses can demonstrate that the goods are not moving into the European Union. For obvious reasons, because otherwise Northern Ireland would become a backdoor to goods that were seeking to avoid the retaliatory tariffs. I would say to the honourable gentleman that the government will take all steps that are necessary to protect British businesses in the very difficult circumstances that we're facing, including continuing to seek to negotiate an economic deal with the United States of America, which is something we've been engaged on for some weeks now. It remains to be seen what may come out of that, but it is part of the calm and considered approach that the government is taking.
Good Trina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The complexity of trade relationships on the island of Ireland are a result of Brexit. The importance of working both north-south and is as important as working east-west. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that strengthening relationships, not just with the European Union, but also the Republic of Ireland government, can put Northern Ireland into a pivotal position to navigate this new uncertainty?
Well, I say to my honourable friend, we are all having to navigate this new uncertainty as a result of the decision that the US administration has made. It is certainly true that leaving the European Union has created new complexities, and the reason there is a Windsor framework is because there are two entities, the United Kingdom and the European Union, with different trading rules, but an open border. And therefore, some method had to be found to deal with the consequence of that. And as I've said to the House before, trying to wish away that basic fact hasn't really worked.
Sir Julian Lewis.
It's really important that we keep cool. It's really important that we keep cool heads, and there will be attempts subsequent to my question to relitigate the Brexit wars. The fact of the matter is that the 2019 Brexit deal and the Windsor Framework give Northern Ireland a unique competitive advantage, 10% exports and access to the single market. Can I ask the Secretary of State if he could look, as a Shadow Secretary of State has implied, at a rapid automatic reimbursement scheme, because I think that scheme is the centre of easing tensions should there be retaliation on the EU side.
Well, the right honourable gentleman is absolutely right about the benefits that the Windsor Framework has given businesses in Northern Ireland in terms of access to the EU market. I would just say to him, rapid automatic doesn't quite square with the need for the businesses in Northern Ireland that are importing American goods in the eventuality of EU retaliatory tariffs, because they do have to demonstrate that they're not then moving on to the European Union, and that does require them to provide evidence to HMRC in order to get the tariff reimbursed.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement. And of course, this situation is a reminder that the people of Northern Ireland were right to oppose Brexit in that referendum, absolutely right. And I'm really disappointed that the opposition started their response to this statement by complaining about the lowest paid workers in Northern Ireland getting a pay rise. Absolutely incredible. But the Minister touched on the trade negotiations between the UK and the United States. Can he reassure us that the situation in Northern Ireland is absolutely at the heart of those negotiations?
Well, I'm very happy to assure my honourable friend that the interests of all parts of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, are uppermost in the minds of all ministers in trying to deal with the situation we now find ourselves in.
Samuel Wilson.
The Secretary of State has said that the EU will take action in relation to tariffs in what is its best interests. But businesses in Northern Ireland expect this government to take action in what is the best interests of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. And he talks about, well, this can be all resolved by the reimbursement scheme. The fact of the matter is the reimbursement scheme has failed. There is masses of information to be produced by businesses. There are delays in payment. Some businesses are waiting for hundreds of thousands of pounds of money to be reimbursed in terms of taxes. So that is not the answer. The answer surely is that the EU or the UK collects the taxes which we impose on American goods and leaves it up to the EU to collect their taxes if they wish to impose them.
Well, I would say to the right honourable gentleman in response to that what he has just proposed ignores the reality that faces Northern Ireland as a result of the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union and the fact there was a problem that had to be solved. And the existence of the duty reimbursement scheme owes the fact of its existence to the Windsor framework itself. It is very important, as I've said to the House, that the scheme works effectively, but businesses do need to provide the information to demonstrate that the goods have not then subsequently moved into the European Union for reasons I think the right honourable gentleman would understand.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm particularly concerned about the cash flow in the small businesses in Northern Ireland in the event that the EU increases their tariffs. In his discussions with the HMRC, has the Secretary of State established what the average waiting time is for the duty reimbursement scheme to kick in? And is there any prospect of foreshortening that if the quantum of amount of money which is out of the door increases in the event of EU tariffs?
Well, I think the honourable gentleman raises a really important point for businesses in Northern Ireland, and as he would expect, I have had precisely that discussion with HMRC. The honest answer to the question, how long does it take? It depends how quickly businesses can provide the necessary information to demonstrate that the goods have not, that they've remained in the United Kingdom and have not moved to the EU. And once that is provided, then the scheme should work effectively. It may help him, however, if I just point out that the custom duty waiver scheme, which is in a separate scheme, does allow up to €300,000 per company over a 3-year rolling average, which will obviously benefit small businesses. And if they come within that heading, then they don't have to pay the tariff up front.
Colin Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, sadly today I have heard nothing to give businesses in my constituency of Upper Bann any reassurances that this UK government is prepared to protect them. I recognise it's not good practice to comment on speculation, but it is and would be good practice to leave businesses in no doubt that this government, their government, whom they pay hefty taxes to, will protect them from EU tariffs. We cannot be left in a scenario where businesses are relying on a duty reimbursement scheme, which doesn't work. It's taking months to get repayment. So I'd ask the Secretary of State to give more clarity to businesses in Upper Bann that he will protect them.
Well, I've done my level best, I say to the honourable member, to set out what the situation is, and we all understand the reasons for them, because Northern Ireland gains from the Windsor Framework because of its access. Well, it does gain from its access to the EU market that other parts of Great Britain do not enjoy, but there is a consequence, which is what we're discussing in relation to the imposition of tariffs by the United States of America, which is a decision that the US administration has taken, and all of us are going to have to deal with the consequences. I would also say that HMRC has, of course, been talking already to businesses that might be affected to make sure that they do understand how both the tariff reimbursement scheme and the custom duty waiver scheme work.
Robbins. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The government's advice to Northern Ireland businesses seems to be just keep calm and carry on. Well, Mr. Speaker, that gives an awful lot of uncertainty to small and medium-sized enterprises in Northern Ireland. Could the Secretary of State actually give a little more meat to the bone in regards to what this government is actually doing? Because, as he did say, the EU will take actions in its interests. Those actions may not be in the interests of Northern Ireland businesses or consumers. So what is this government actually going to do?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, in the circumstances in which this country and many countries around the world find themselves, we are having this discussion because of a decision that the United States administration has taken. We do not control that. What we do have to seek to control is our response to it. And I have tried to lay out for the House today what the position is, what is available to support businesses who may be affected by the EU tariffs once we understand what they are, and we will see how extensive they may or may not be, and then businesses will start to work out for themselves what is the consequence and how can we use the mechanism that is in the Windsor Framework of the reimbursement scheme to get back the money that they have to pay in a tariff.
Speaker, businesses do require clarity and certainty. Will the Secretary of State undertake to come back to the House as soon as we have that clarity and certainty, and ensure that the EU understand that open border that he keeps talking about is an unclosable border, and tries to give more certainty to those businesses to develop their business forthcoming in the future?
Well, I would say, notwithstanding what we have been discussing today, given that Northern Ireland imports about £800 million worth of goods from the United States of America, which is about 2% of the total purchases made by Northern Ireland. The rest, the 98% of the purchases, are unaffected by any EU retaliatory tariffs relating to goods that are bought into Northern Ireland. And as I travel around Northern Ireland, there are great business opportunities, lots of investment that is coming in. And as I said to the House last week, Northern Ireland has a higher rate of growth than the UK as a whole and the lowest unemployment.
Jim Ellis.
As Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, is the Secretary of State not embarrassed that he and his government have no control over the tariffs in respect of goods imported into Northern Ireland? And isn't the obvious and inevitable answer to repatriate to the United Kingdom control over trade laws? And what happens if Northern Ireland is used as a conduit by the Republic of Ireland or the EU to export goods to the US? Who checks those goods and where?
Well, I think I've said to the honourable gentleman before, I wouldn't have started from here myself in relation to the cause that led to eventually the negotiation of the Windsor Framework, which was a huge improvement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. But we don't control the decisions that the United States administration has taken. What we have to do is to make sure that we stand with businesses, including in Northern Ireland, to provide them with support, and a mechanism that allows them to reclaim the tariff is the most practical step that we can take. It's already in place because of the Windsor Framework.
Jim Shutt.
Mr. Speaker,
the Secretary of State has outlined the case, but I'm afraid he hasn't given any answers, and that's disappointing. The promise was made to Northern Ireland MPs that we would not be disadvantaged by any EU retentions. This is clearly not to be the case, and government needs to address this directly. Will the Secretary of State set out, please, what discussions to extricate Northern Ireland from EU rules will begin, and when we can expect to see our interests looked after, as was promised by both the Prime Minister and indeed by the Secretary of State. And I was here for both of those last week, and we got that promise, and today, unfortunately, we don't.
Will the situation that Northern Ireland businesses may find themselves in if there are EU retaliatory tariffs is a product of the Windsor Framework, which gives benefits, as I've said, to businesses in Northern Ireland, as well as requiring the payment of the tariffs that can be claimed back. I would say the single most important reason for sticking with the implementation of the Windsor Framework is we want to negotiate closer economic relationships with the European Union, including an SPS and a veterinary agreement. And members from Northern Ireland have on many occasions raised the consequences of the current arrangement. Things could be a lot easier if we get that agreement. But as I've pointed out to the House many times before, if we don't